Okay, so this demo is going to be about scoring and slipping, which is the method that we use in ceramics to attach clay together permanently. I've started by making 2 pinch pots that are the same size, and this is kind of a precursor to the Animal Bank project, where we will attach 2 pinch pots together to create the body of the animal, and then add other sculpted elements to the surface to make it a recognizable animal. So you'll get 2 lessons out of this demo. But to attach these together, we have to score and slip them. And you just need basic tools of a pin tool. We have some slip, a rounded wooden tool. This is called a rib or a kidney. It's a flexible metal tool that smooths the surface. And we also have a wooden spoon. But the first thing to do to create the body of this animal, I'm going to score both rims of the pinch pots using my pin tool. And scoring is just creating hash marks or X's, or what I like to call as Velcro for clay. When you think about Velcro, both sides of the Velcro are super textured, and you want these clay pieces to fit together just like Velcro. So I'm making very, very deep, rough marks where I want the clay to be attached. I'm not being gentle about it. They don't need to be evenly spaced out. That's going to do nothing. You really want it to be nice and textured. So I'm doing that around both sides. And then I'm going to apply slip, which is the glue that keeps ceramics together. And we apply slip just with a brush, so the regular brushes you use for glazing or using water on a piece. And I'm going to be very generous with the slip and really make sure that it gets into all those cracks. I'm only going to apply slip on one side because you don't need it on both, as long as it's pretty thick and gets into all the divots that you just made here. And once I do that, I'm going to take the other pot and slowly smush them together. And I kind of know that it's a good joint if I see some slip squishing out. And now I have a sealed piece. I also have this really ugly ring around that shows where the 2 are attached. So the next step, once you create the body of your animal, is to seal up the crack. I'm just going to take some extra clay and roll a coil. And so I just start by rolling the clay in between my hands, and then using my fingertips to the palm of my hand and rolling back and forth and slowly moving my hands out. All I want to do is create a thin coil of clay that's going to fill in that seam. So I don't need to have anything that's really big. If it's super big, you just have to smooth it out, and then it just becomes more annoying. So I'm going to take this little thin piece of clay and smush it in that seam. I'm not totally worried that these don't match up perfectly, because I can always shape it and cover up any areas that are uneven. So this is excess. And now I take my wooden tool, which is rounded here. Sometimes you can use your finger, but I like to use a tool because you can grab the clay a little bit easier. And I'm going to take half of the coil, smush it one way, and then the other half the other way. So I'm sealing up the seam here. I'm being pretty messy about it at this point. I don't really care what it looks like because I can do smoothing afterward. I just need to get it sealed. So once I have this sealed, these are not going to come apart, okay? So this is the body of your animal. But what I did was also trap air inside. And like I mentioned in the pinch pot demonstration, air is the killer of clay. It can dry it out, but it can also cause clay to explode in the kiln. So when we heat this piece of clay up, if there is no way for the air to escape the inside of this, it will explode. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just poke a small hole in the top. Doesn't really matter where it is. But now I can begin to shape this, and I also know that there is a little air hole to let things out. So I'm just gonna kind of pat my hand around here to even it out a little bit. I can use this tool here to begin to smooth the surface. It gets any finger marks out. If you have very, very drastic areas, say you put an enormous coil around here and it looks like Saturn and you need to like really smush it down, you can use the back side of a wooden spoon and begin to paddle the clay, and it'll take down any really large areas. But you can spend some time and really prepare the body of your animal. After you have everything smoothed and kind of the shape that you want, you can begin to add the other elements. So for this bunny rabbit here, the body was made by 2 pinch pots, but then the head here is a 3rd pinch pot. So depending on the animal that you choose, you may need to add multiple pinch pots to either give it a head or extend it out with a tail or something like that. So I'll show you how to add a head to the body here. So I've made a 3rd smaller pinch pot, and I'm just gonna, I don't know what this animal is gonna be, but I would score and slip it to the surface like that. Before I score and slip, I'm just gonna trace it around so I know where my score marks need to go. And then I score this surface very deeply. And I score inside the line that I just drew. Now all of this interior clay here that's going to be covered up by the head, I don't need that clay. So before I attach the head on permanently, I'm actually going to cut all this excess clay out. And that does 2 things. It gets rid of some weight. I don't need that clay, but it also provides a channel for the air that's in the head here to go into the body and then out of the body via either a lid if you're making a jar or a slit in the back if you're doing an animal bank. So you have to create open channels for air to flow out of your piece. So the next step is applying slip to the head. And squishing it on. Again, I don't really know what animal this is going to be. It's just going to be some weird creature at this point. So I squish it on, and then I don't really need to add an extra coil around the base here because I have some extra clay in the head here. You could, if you wanted to, really reinforce it, add the coil around, and smooth that in. But you can also just take extra clay here and seal it up. But the important thing is that all seams, when you score and slip things together, need to be sealed, either by just taking the extra clay or adding a coil. So once that's sealed up, then I can show you how to do some more features for animals. I really don't know what this looks like, but let's have it sitting on its back legs here. So an easy way to do kind of a leg like this is to create kind of a spoon shape. I'll divide these in 2. These might be small compared to what it looks like. So I'm just going to kind of start to pinch out just a solid piece of clay, pinch out kind of a spoon or paddle shape hind leg of something. Because if you think of animals and people, we all have joints, like hip joints and shoulder joints. If I tried to stick a leg on something that looks like that, it's not really going to look all that realistic. But the second you add kind of a joint to it, it starts to really look like a more realistic animal. So I would do the same thing, trace around where I'm going to score and slip it, and then score the surface of each piece. Now, because this leg is not hollow, I do not need to cut a hole in it. So the only time you cut a hole in something is if you're creating an air channel. But this leg is solid, so it doesn't need a hole. So I'm just going to score that, add some slip, and then smush this on. And do the same thing. We can smooth with a little bit of wooden tool here. And now this back leg kind of looks like it's sitting. So it's still facing forward. It's not really splaying out or anything. Let's poke some eyes in this so you can kind of see some sort of little animal emerging. You can draw some nose, mouth. You can make some ears. So anything that you sculpt and add to the clay should be scored and slipped. Like these ears you would score and slip on. Even if you do little eyeballs, they should be scored and slipped. For small elements, you don't need extra clay or smoothing down because they're so small, especially if you're doing eyes. If you were doing little pupils in there, I really would just make a tiny X, put a dot of slip, and squish it on. I'm not going to try to smooth that down. It's so small, just a little bit of scoring and slipping will work fine. The next thing I want to talk about is texture, and a couple different ways of creating texture in the surface. If you want something to look furry, you can just take your pin tool and make little marks in the direction of the way the fur grows. The longer the marks you make, the more kind of long-haired the animal will be. If you make tiny little marks, it's going to be more of a short-haired animal. If you really want to add lots of fluffiness to it, you can always take extra clay and really texture that. And I'm just taking my pin tool and really making little marks on it. And then I would score this textured coil to the surface of the animal, and then texture over it again. And that just creates, if you're doing a lion or something that has a lot of fur, this would get smushed on, and then you can really go again with the texture. And that gives it a fluffy look without a ton of extra weight. So you're not adding a whole extra bit, you're just kind of smushing around a coil. For reptiles or any sort of like amphibian that has scales, you can find different tools that are rounded, and you might, impress scales into something like that. It's really just finding things that make impressions in the clay and experimenting with different textures. So this is my bear lizard, I don't even know. And that's it.